job to reorganize the CIA. He had other priorities. He decided not to do it. But this is an insight into his thinking, and it's an insight into his thinking that the CIA didn't want anybody to know about.
Why? What is it? Yeah. What does it tell us?
It tells us a bunch of things. What Schlesinger is talking about in this passage is what's called controlled American sources. These are American sources that we totally control. CIA officers who work for the U.S. government in official cover positions. And Schlesinger says, the CIA is encroaching on your foreign policy. And he says, at the time of your inauguration, 47% of the State Department political officers around the world were in fact CIA officers. 47%. We knew a lot of CIA officers took those cover positions.
Right.
We didn't know they had half of them. That's in 1960. I mean, and it made me wonder, what's that figure today?
Yeah. Right.
And you know
That's
what?
the deep state.
It's probably just as high.
Yeah, you know what?
Being honest.
And it's a classified secret.
Right.
So this is very sensitive stuff. 123 people working in the Paris embassy were with the CIA. And in there, Schlesinger tells a very telling anecdote. In 1961, there was an attempted coup against French President Charles de Gaulle. He was trying to pull out of Algeria. Algeria was kind of like Vietnam for America. It was like this intractable foreign involvement, and just ultimately we just had to get out, but very divisive at home. And so divisive, in fact, that the right wing in the French government went after de Gaulle, and they were going to overthrow him. And the story was that it was known that the CIA station in Paris was on the top floor of the U.S. Embassy. And the story was the lights in the embassy were on all night on the night of the coup. And de Gaulle always thought that the CIA was behind that coup. A year later, when a group of assassins from the same right-wing faction try and ambush de Gaulle when he's going to his country house, and almost succeed. Unlike Kennedy, de Gaulle had a very good driver. And when the shots rang out, he did exactly the right thing and evaded the gunfire. And de Gaulle escaped. But de Gaulle thought the CIA knew about that attempt on his life. And de Gaulle never believed the official story of the assassination. So that story, this memo, that page, is the origin story of the mistrust between the CIA, between Kennedy and the CIA, that would endure for the rest of his presidency.
Right. I think that's so important for you to lay that out in
the
that way.
suspicion that the CIA might assassinate a...
Right. So what is the decision tree that flows from this memo? How do we then get to characters like Angleton and the organization of an eventual alleged plot?
Right. So the second most important document that came out it's actually not one document. It was 9 documents about...
Let's put up F4.
Yeah,
about 9 documents about James Angleton. And, so I don't go looking for one document that's going to tell me the whole thing. But when you look at these documents taken together, and documents that have been released in recent years, you understand something that I just don't think people, I know no one knows, and the mainstream media organizations just don't want to talk about it, okay? Lee Harvey Oswald was not a lone nut, okay?
Right.
He was a known quantity to a small group of CIA counterintelligence officers for 4 years. Between November 1959 and November 1963, we now have all of the information that the CIA had on Oswald. 42 documents, 180 pages of material, okay? And, he was followed from beginning to end. There was no point in those 4 years, or very few points in those 4 years, where top people in the CIA did not have Lee Harvey Oswald's home address.
Wow.
Between November 1915, and the guy's moving all the time.
Right.
He goes to Moscow, to Minsk, he comes back to Fort Worth, he moves to New Orleans, he comes back to Dallas, he goes to Mexico, he comes back to Dallas. Every step of the way, top people in the CIA knew about it. So that alone is, that's another thing that sets the context. Now, I have a lot of arguments with, mainstream media journalists who say, they were just incompetent. They just missed him. Okay, well, a couple of things. And this is what's important about the document that came out last week. Angleton, this new document shows, lied under oath to JFK investigators. And there's a very stark exchange in the new document, which shows very clearly that he lied about Oswald's involvement in one CIA project. But Oswald tripped many CIA. So what Angleton was hiding and what the CIA was hiding was, and what the story of the quote-unquote lone gunman hides, is this extraordinary level of interest at the top of the CIA in this alleged pathetic, sociopathic, loser who nobody would ever care about, or so we are often told. And yet, James Angleton, one of the smartest, most capable intelligence officers of his generation, regarded as the premier counterintelligence officer in the Western world, is paying attention to Lee Harvey Oswald for 4 years. The CIA has never explained this. So, because they don't have to, because reporters from the New York Times don't go and say, what is this, And you have this weird cognitive dissonance going on where, people won't look at this new evidence. They won't talk about it. They won't cover it because it works like this. Well, that's a piece of evidence that's, that's of interest to Morley, and we know he's a conspiracy theorist. So that's kind of tainted evidence, and we don't need to think about it because we know for sure that Oswald killed the president.
Right.
It's like, and so that's been going on for years, and so, nobody knows the story that's just coming into view. So, I'm saying somehow this is part of the JFK story. You can't say, one question was, does this change the narrative? No one document changes the narrative, but the entire Oswald file that James Angleton had on his desk when Kennedy left for Dallas, that changes the narrative. What the file shows, there were 2 FBI reports on Oswald, everything he had been doing recently. He'd gotten arrested, he'd gone to Mexico City, he'd come back. 2 FBI reports saying Oswald's in Dallas. They land on Angleton's desk on November 14th and 15th, 1963. Wow. Never been explained.
Wow.
So that's where we're at. And, will the CIA explain? Unlike the FBI, the CIA has not turned over any new documents as a result of Trump's order. The CIA, I would say, is not in compliance with Trump's order. They have JFK documents in their possession. So what happens with the CIA? Are they going to turn over the JFK documents they have in their hands? That's a big question. But with these 2 documents, I think we see kind of the big picture of Kennedy in conflict with his national security establishment, and CIA officers paying close attention to the man who supposedly killed him. And we're going to learn more about that. And it is complicated, but I'll tell you a little bit of good news. I am going to testify before Representative Luna's hearing on JFK on April 1st.
Excellent.
And I'm going to talk about this. And you need to slow down, and I'm hoping that I'll have the time to explain to the task force, what this story is and how we can get the rest of it. What's interesting about this story is, I'm so happy to be here because right now, requests for interviews are running about 2 to 1, 3 to 1 in favor of conservative sites.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right? Jesse Waters called me up. Jesse is my new best friend. I go on his show, and he's like, those Democrats, they're burning down the Teslas all over the world. And I'm sitting there, man, I can't afford a Tesla. I drive a Nissan Rogue.
I wouldn't. Why is he asking you about Teslas?
Yeah, right.
No, he didn't.
No,
he didn't
it's probably in the lead-in.
No. So that was the show before, and I'm thinking, I'm going to say something to this guy. I'm going to say something to this guy. Yeah. And then he comes on, and he does like a 4-minute introduction to JFK's story, and it's like, I pretty much agree with that, Jesse.
Yeah.
And you know what I realized? I think what the JFK issue does is it unites the anti-war base of both sides.
That's right.
On the left, people remember Kennedy as an inspiring leader, wants to end the Cold War, wants to take the American empire in a new direction, and are anti-war today, right? Like whatever the details of Ukraine and Gaza, we're against those wars because we're against war in general, We don't think there's good wars. Those wars could have been prevented. And on the right, you have a similar sentiment. It's more about we don't want to spend our blood and treasure on foreigners, okay? But it's anti-war also. It's an abhorrence of war. That's what's driving the JFK story, and that's what brings people together, and that's why I have no problem going on Jesse Waters,
And Angleton's relationship with Israeli intelligence has also been getting a lot of attention. Can you unpack some of that?
About that?
Yeah, so I talked about don't look at 1 document, look at 9 documents. So the 9 documents about Angleton tell 2 stories that are important. One is about the birth of COINTELPRO, okay? COINTELPRO is typically thought of as an FBI program, right? J. Edgar Hoover, it's associated with J. Edgar Hoover, but COINTELPRO was really a joint CIA-FBI program, and which Angleton, as counterintelligence chief, had a lot of influence on a counterintelligence program of the FBI. So that's one thing.